special X-Play XL. Today we have got the top 10 of '08.
The biggest, craziest, and most bombastic stories of the year.
I am Morgan Webb.
And I'm Adam Sessler.
We are coming to you from the G4 studios in Los Angeles.
Now, coming up, we've got hot intergalactic sex,
Woo.
mega lawsuits, and billion-dollar hostile takeovers as we cover the biggest stories of the year.
We will be joined by Kotaku's Brian Crescente and Sore Thumbs Dan Shu to talk about everything from stolen exclusives to the biggest video game disappointments of the year.
And later, are video games the cause of violence in kids?
X-Play examines the ongoing war over video game violence, like the wars on drugs, homelessness, or terrorism. This one ain't going away anytime soon. These are the top 10 news stories of the year, and the list starts here.
Now, coming in at number 10 is a man who's no stranger to controversy, whether it's sexual harassment lawsuits, bagging on Capcom, or the fact that no one's seen his eyes since 1991. But this year, Itagaki found himself at war with his employers. Any hardcore gamer worth their weight in Funyuns knows the name Tomonobu Itagaki. He's the outspoken creator of both the Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive series. Over the years, his development group, known as Team Ninja, has worked on some of Tecmo's most successful games. On top of that, Itagaki helped create spin-offs like DOA Extreme, which took the art of digital breast modeling to creepy new levels. With their solid sales numbers, it seemed like Itagaki and Tecmo would be together forever. But the video game industry was rocked when, on June 2nd, he announced he was resigning from the company. Not only that, the outspoken director was suing Tecmo for allegedly withholding bonus pay he was owed for previous work. According to a fax statement to journalists, Itagaki initially filed his claim on May 14th for unpaid bonuses and for quote-unquote unreasonable and disingenuous statements made towards me. The suit asked for damages of 148 million yen, or about 1.5 million US dollars, depending on exactly how badly our economy is doing at the time. The statement specifically reads that Tecmo bosses promised Itagaki a boatload of money upon completion of Dead or Alive 4. When the game was finished and he asked for the bonus, company president Yoshimi Yasuda allegedly refused. To date, the case has not been settled, although in August, Yasuda resigned from the company, reportedly for personal reasons. Itagaki is no stranger to controversy. In 2006, he was the subject of a sexual harassment lawsuit brought by a former employee who claims the leathery, sunglass-clad developer forcibly kissed her. Gee, who would believe a story like that about a guy who looks so wholesome? The lawsuit was later dismissed by Japanese courts, but either way, it seems that no matter where Itagaki goes, full-body controversy is sure to follow.
Okay, we couldn't possibly do a special about the year in gaming without one of the industry's most controversial opponents. Of course, I'm talking about Jack Thompson, ace attorney, or should I say former ace attorney? This year, Jack discovered that the Florida bar wasn't going to tolerate him any longer. Those of us who are passionate about video games would likely agree that simply speaking the name Jack Thompson would be enough to put a foul taste in our mouths. After all, we are talking about the same Jack Thompson who campaigned against numerous high-profile games, including Counter-Strike, Sims 2, Mortal Kombat, Killer 7, Bully, and just about every game over the last 8 years released in the Grand Theft Auto franchise.
Jack the Hammer Thompson, born Cleveland, Ohio, graduated Vanderbilt, middle of his class.
In May of 2008, after carefully reviewing 4 volumes of exhibits and approximately 2,400 pages of transcribed testimony, Florida Judge David Tunis found Thompson guilty on 27 out of 31 misconduct charges. To the delight of many, on September 25th, 2008, anti-video game activist John Bruce Thompson, a.k.a. our buddy Jack, was officially disbarred by none other than the Florida Supreme Court. The court's ruling required Thompson to reimburse the Florida bar over $42,000 in legal fees and effectively prevented him from being able to practice law in the state of Florida forever. But is Jack Thompson a bad person? Probably not.
Objection!
After all, his actions over the years have provided us plenty of gaming update stories and have inspired numerous entertaining G4 parodies.
Well, let's just say that justice was served here today.
But if we do this my way. Jack Thompson's way.
Yes, sir.
From an organized protest in front of the headquarters of Rockstar Games to video game-related lawsuits seeking millions of dollars in damages, Thompson's career has been an eye-opening and frustrating journey for just about everyone involved. Even Thompson himself would have to admit that 2008 was a rough year for anti-video game attorneys in Florida.
We'll miss him. In an effort to get a true, fair, and balanced look at 2008, we brought in some outside experts on the subject. Gaming, not 2008. Joining us now to talk about the year that was is Kotaku's Brian Crescente and Sore Thumb's Dan Shu. 2008 coming to a close, we can finally look back on a year filled with sex scenes, mega mergers, and blockbuster sequels. What stories really mattered in 2008, and what can we expect in 2009? Joining us today from Denver, managing editor at Kotaku.com, Brian Crescente. Glad to have you back on again.
Hello.
And also joining us
for having me again.
Oh, thanks, Brian. And joining us from San Francisco, editor over at Sore Thumbs and a frequent X-Play correspondent, Mr. Dan Shu. Great to see you again as well.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, I just want to get both of your takes. I'll start with you, Brian. 2008, was this a good year for games? Was this a good year for the industry?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, despite this sort of flagging economy, we still saw a lot of really good games come out. What's really weird to me, though, is that when you look across sort of the landscape of games that have been released, there isn't one like last year. There were one or two that really stood out. And this year, it seems like it's a more level playing field. And not that there aren't some fantastic games, but it's really hard to sort of separate one from the bunch.
Dan, do you see the same thing, that kind of when surveying the games across the landscape, that nothing really stands out above all else?
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Instead of I think all the money going to a couple of AAA titles, it seems like, hey, there's a few of these AAA titles and then a bunch of strong AA and A titles across the board. And what was nice is they were all spread out throughout the year. So we had like GTA and Metal Gear Solid 4 earlier in the year. We have, of course, our holiday rush. So yeah, it's a nice even year throughout for quality and quantity.
Now, of course, there's always that one game that's kind of a gem to you that you can't figure out why the rest of the world didn't see it as such. Brian, is there a game that you didn't think got the attention it deserved?
You know, I've been really thinking about that, and it's funny because of the way things have sort of changed this year when it comes to casual gaming and hardcore. I mean, I might even say like a game like Chains of Olympus for the PSP, it got tons of credit for being such a good game. But people, I think, we released so early in the year that people have forgotten about it, and it really was a phenomenal title. You know, just even laying aside the fact that it was on a portable.
Yeah, but it was amazing, just so that they could make that game fit so effectively on such a smaller system. Now, Dan, was there a game that disappointed you? That it was supposed to have been a great game, but then for one reason or another, it just kind of fell short.
I think for me, that was Mercenaries 2, because I love co-op games, and my girlfriend and I played that, and her desire to play that game with me just plummeted when she found out that all her progress in her co-op game wasn't carrying over to her single-player profile. So I think they just did a lot of things wrong with co-op. It didn't live up to what it was supposed to be. It was a fun game otherwise, but they could have done so much more with it.
Anything fall short for you, Brian?
You know, a lot of games, I wouldn't say they were disappointments, but I think that I had really big expectations for games. So games like Little Big Planet, which I absolutely adored, and Spore, which I thought did a fairly good job, still, when I finally got those games in my hand, I just, they didn't deliver the level of play, or at least the amount of gaming that I thought I was going to get out of them. More Spore than Little Big Planet, but, like Spore, we've all been waiting for it for so long, and then it arrives, and you're kind of like, yeah, that was fun. But it's not what you expected.
Yeah, expectation can be quite a burden on a lot of games, especially anything coming out of Will Wright. Now, moving from games to the gaming industry as a whole, a fair amount of stuff happened this year that we're detailing on this show, from the attempted, takeover of Take-Two by EA to the fact that GTA 4 just broke every single entertainment sales record known to man. Was it more or less a positive year for the industry in this regard, or was it, more negative? Brian?
I think it was more positive. There was a lot of news that happened throughout the year that was really industry shaping, but none of it was enormous. There was no enormous spike of news. But you look at the way E3 sort of disappointed and is now trying to reimagine itself, and you have all these other shows trying to fill in the gap that it left, at least for a year or two. And you look at how the rise of casual gaming and hard casual gamers, people who like both hardcore and casual games, and the fact that the Wii sold 2 friggin' million consoles, or Nintendo sold 2 million consoles last month, is just absurd. I mean, it tells you that things are changing, and you know, maybe not for the better, but at least it's becoming much more mainstream, I think.
Yes, Dan, I mean, that's really been a big talk. It's like, how much are casual games really taking over what we have always regarded as kind of like that hardcore area of the games industry? I mean, are we really seeing all these new gamers coming in that the landscape is changing?
Yeah, when you look at how well the Wii's doing, I mean, we have to remember, we got to keep in perspective here that, you know, people like to rag on the Wii and how casual games are getting, but don't forget, we got Mario Galaxy a year ago, and to me that counts as like 10 hardcore games. It's so good. But not every casual game is going to be a Bejeweled, you know, or a Wii Play in terms of sales numbers. So you're going to see a lot of games come out because they're cheap to make, cheap to produce, but they're not all necessarily going to sell well. So I think, you know, don't worry, we're still going to see those Gears of Wars and Grand Theft Autos, because those still sell better than most casual games.
All right, we're going to give you guys kind of a megaphone for the entire games industry. We'll start with you, Brian. If you have one piece of advice for the industry to really think about for 2009, what would it be?
You know, I think that from an outsider's perspective, I worry that game developers are perhaps listening too much to catchphrases and looking too much at trends, and maybe sometimes forget that to make a good game, you just have to make it good. It doesn't have to be casual or hardcore. You don't have to worry about buzzwords or trying to hit on all these bullet points. Just make something that you enjoy, and people are going to buy it.
Dan, what's your piece of advice?
I would tell the industry just to spread them. You know, we saw in 2008, like we talked about earlier, that, hey, you can release a game in April, you can release a game over the summer, and it'll still sell well. And then we see games like maybe Dead Space or Mirror's Edge that didn't sell so well because it's crowded by big games like Gears of War 2 during the holiday season. So, you know, spread them out a little bit, give us a few games to play in the springtime, summertime. That's going to make the industry healthy, give gamers something to play all throughout the year.
Actually, just one last quick question for you guys. Brian, is there a particular game that you already have your eye on for 2009?
Oh, wow. That's a really hard question. You know, I think that I'm looking at some of the stuff coming out, but I really am, I'm still having trouble, like, keeping up with what's come out this year. There are a number of games that I haven't had a chance to play.
Dan, is there anything that's got you a little bit excited about, 2009?
I think Resident Evil 5, I mean, that's coming up really soon, early 2009, but, I love co-op gaming. Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time, so that's one I'm really excited about.
And it offers me an excellent segue to remind people that we're going to have that on our show tomorrow, so I appreciate that as well.
How convenient.
Thank you so much for coming by. Have a happy new year, and we look forward to seeing you in 2009.
Thanks.
All right, stay right there. X-Play XL will have more of the top 10 news stories of 2008 right after this.
When X-Play's special look at the top news stories of 2008 continues, we'll dive into some of the year's most heated issues, like the dawn of the 90-minute cutscene, the ever-changing E3, and if this show should get a bailout. What? We could use a couple billion. Plus, Grand Theft childhood author Sheryl Olsen comes by to talk about the year's most controversial game and what lies in the future for video game legislation. If it happened in 2008, it's here. X-Play's Top 10 of 2008 continues right after this.
Welcome back to X-Play's countdown of the top 10 stories of 2008. Well, we may be all preoccupied with Game of the Year nonsense at this moment. The summer was dominated by the controversy surrounding Metal Gear Solid 4. More specifically, the way that Konami dealt with the game's release. In 1987, video game designer Hideo Kojima pioneered stealth-based gameplay with the release of a third-person action game simply titled Metal Gear. 21 years later, Kojima Productions would celebrate the release of their highly anticipated PlayStation 3 exclusive, Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. The game would eventually go on to sell over 4 million copies worldwide, but not before stirring up controversy among journalists and reviewers. Prior to launch, Konami, the game's publisher, placed a number of review limitations on members of the media. Reviewers were asked not to discuss the game's install times, length of cutscenes, product placement, and a number of story-related elements. Shortly after, well-respected video game publication Electronic Gaming Monthly announced they had decided to delay their review of Metal Gear Solid 4 because they weren't happy with the limitations imposed by Konami. 3 weeks before the game's June 12th release, internet rumor claimed the game included a 90-minute cutscene and required a 4.6 gigabyte installation to the PlayStation 3's hard drive. The Metal Gear controversy had officially begun. Soon forum boards, blogs, and episodes of Sessler's Soapbox would explode with heated opinions. Konami claimed they were only trying to prevent reviewers from leaking spoilers. 1 week before the game's release, a Kojima Productions spokesperson revealed that the game required an 8-minute installation as well as a number of 2 to 3 minute installs between acts. Next, review limitations were amended, allowing reviewers to comment on the length of cutscenes.
It's not over.
Unfortunately, some publishers continue to enforce questionable limitations. In a similar fashion, a review issue popped up for another game. In November, a PR firm representing Tomb Raider Underworld admitted they were attempting to manage review scores at the request of the game's publisher, Eidos Interactive. Looking back, this year's Metal Gear controversy didn't have a significantly negative effect on the game's overall sales. The event did, however, shed light on the importance of integrity in the industry and proved once again that even bad press can be good press.
Considering that industry giant Electronic Arts is laying off employees and reporting that profits are way down, it seems kind of silly that they spent the better part of the year trying to buy out one of their rivals. Our number 7 story went back and forth so much, we thought it would never end. When it comes to companies with strong franchises, it's hard to beat Take-Two. The publisher has control over the Grand Theft Auto series, which has sold over 70 million copies. That's well over $2 billion in revenue. That kind of scratch could buy you a whole lot of hookers to beat to death.
I bet you want to touch these, huh?
Besides Rockstar, the company owns subsidiaries like 2K Games, which publish critical hits like BioShock and horrible misses like The Da Vinci Code. Over the last few years, the company's stock has had some ups and downs thanks to controversies like hot coffee and delays in releasing GTA 4. On February 19th, 2 months before that game was to launch, Electronic Arts CEO John Riccitiello sent a formal letter to Take-Two chairman Strauss Zelnick offering to buy out their company for $26 a share. Believing their stock was worth more, Take-Two immediately refused, and at an annual shareholders meeting, Zelnick made a plea to investors not to accept EA's deal. The public offer dried on for months, while shareholders of both companies debated whether or not $26 per share was a fair price for Take-Two. In August, EA decided not to renew its public bid for Take-Two. EA issued a statement claiming that, quote, after careful consideration, including a management presentation, EA has decided not to make a proposal to acquire Take-Two and has terminated discussions, end quote. In other words, don't expect these two companies to send each other Valentine's Day cards.
Our number 6 story is about a merger that actually did go through, and to say it caused a stir is a bit of an understatement. The king of sequels merged with the king of MMOs, and a whole lot of games got orphaned. The deal also gave us a new word, ActiBliz. One of the video game industry's biggest news stories this year was the multi-billion-dollar merger deal between mega publishers Activision and Blizzard Entertainment. On July 9, 2008, under the terms of an agreement with Vivendi Entertainment, Activision was officially combined with Blizzard Entertainment and divisions of Vivendi Games to form a new public company now known as Activision Blizzard. It was the biggest merger in the history of video games, one that would unite some of the industry's most popular franchises, including Guitar Hero, Call of Duty, Spider-Man, StarCraft, Diablo, and Warcraft. After all of the contracts had been signed, Vivendi became the majority shareholder in the merger with a 52% stake in the company. The deal was reported to be worth $18.9 billion. That's right, billion with a B. Immediately following the merger, many World of Warcraft players panicked at the thought of Blizzard becoming part of a large corporation. Many worried that their favorite developer would lose their independent vision. In response, Blizzard posted a FAQ on their website, which emphatically states there will be no changes in the way Blizzard Entertainment operates. In fact, you might be pleased to hear that both Activision's and Blizzard's game development teams continue to operate as separate entities.
Go! Go!
However, the merger did cause reshuffling in the company's portfolio of video games. While Activision opted to retain franchises like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and the upcoming open-world action title Prototype, the futures of several other IPs, namely Ghostbusters the video game, and Tim Schafer's Brutal Legend, were temporarily undecided. Eventually, Ghostbusters the video game would fall into the publishing hands of Atari, and Brutal Legend would be picked up by Electronic Arts. So what can we expect next from Activision Blizzard in the near future? Well, if you can summon the willpower to log off of the recently released World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King expansion set over the next few years, you might have enough time to consider playing Blizzard's StarCraft 2 and Diablo 3, or Activision's Guitar Hero Metallica and Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. In the end, we can't wait to see what Activision Blizzard unveils in 2009, as long as it isn't a massively multiplayer role-playing game starring Tony Hawk.
Coming up, our top 5 most explosive stories of the year, including the raunchy alien sex that made Fox News all hot under the collar, and the announcement that had fanboys crying betrayal. All that and more in our top 10 of 2008. Welcome back to X-Play's special look at the top 10 biggest stories of the year. Now, 2008 kicked off with a bang, literally, thanks to Fox News. A couple months after the release of Mass Effect, someone in the building finally caught wind that there was a sex scene in the game, and it all went downhill from there.
Perhaps no story this year was as big of a mess as the alien sex scene in Mass Effect. The game actually hit shelves back in 2007, and upon arrival, it was a critical hit. Players loved the tried-and-true gameplay and the story's intricate branching paths. In fact, Mass Effect was probably one of the last games people would expect a controversy over. But on January 21st, Fox News aired a news segment erroneously claiming that the game gives, quote, the ability for players to engage in full graphic sex, end quote. In actuality, the sex scene they reference is relatively tame, along the lines of what you might see on a network primetime drama. Fox News also claimed that Mass Effect was marketed towards children, another statement that was never backed up factually. Because of Fox's brazen inaccuracies, the segment became a firestorm of controversy. Electronic Arts sent an open letter to the network asking for a retraction. Fox did not give one, but responded by inviting representatives from the company on air. This is widely criticized as an obvious ploy to milk more airtime out of a fabricated controversy. I couldn't help tackling the controversy myself.
It is becoming distressingly common in this day and age that discussions about culture are hijacked by politicians and the media only to simplify their meaning and lock out legitimate voices. Lucky for me, I have a television show, and taking a cue from Fox News' indisputable integrity, I have this to say to Mrs. Lawrence. I haven't read your book, but it completely sucks. I, for one, feel that it should be kept out of the hands of impressionable young women who fear that they, too, might develop into the appalling simpleton that you have demonstrated yourself to be. But then again, Rupert Murdoch wouldn't have it any other way.
Yep, couldn't have said it better. Ultimately, the controversy didn't seem to hurt the game, which went on to sell millions of copies and receive numerous awards. Fox News' reputation, well, that's a whole different story.
Our number 4 story for 2008 has drained my wallet and taken over half my living room. And no, I'm not talking about the time I let Blair crash at my place. It was a terrible idea. Music games have become a force to be reckoned with. They are no longer a niche enjoyed by a couple of hardcore gamers. Everyone's getting on board. In 2008, the music genre of video games exploded. This year's biggest music releases included Electronic Arts' Rock Band 2, a very impressive follow-up to 2007's standout party pleaser, and Activision's Guitar Hero World Tour, which added a new drum set, microphone, and an updated guitar. Since their debut, both franchises have sold and continue to sell into the millions. As a result, rhythm-based music games have inadvertently revitalized the music industry. With the advent of secure digital distribution and online-enabled consoles, publishers have scrambled to sign music's biggest names in an attempt to score exclusive content. In June of 2008, Activision released Guitar Hero Aerosmith, the first in what will soon be a series of band-specific Guitar Hero games. Next year, Guitar Hero fans will get their hands on the highly anticipated Guitar Hero Metallica. Not to be outdone, EA and Harmonix signed rock icons AC/DC to an agreement for a Rock Band expansion called the AC/DC Live Rock Band Track Pack. Sold exclusively at Walmart, the track pack included 18 of the band's most popular songs and was considered a standalone game. EA also convinced big names like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Foo Fighters, and The Who to sign over entire albums for their game. Activision's next major move was to secure the rights to the likeness of rock's most influential guitar player, Jimi Hendrix. Hendrix eventually made his exclusive video game debut along with 3 of his master recordings in Guitar Hero World Tour. But in the end, it was MTV Games and Harmonix who scored the most impressive music deal of 2008. After 17 months of negotiations, Apple Corps Limited announced they had signed an agreement to help create an exclusive new Rock Band video game featuring the iconic music of the Beatles. When it releases, the still untitled Beatles Rock Band game will feature music that spans the entire Beatles catalog. From the fully functional music studio in Guitar Hero World Tour to the 500 playable songs available in Rock Band, music games have no doubt provided us the tools needed to unleash the drum-pounding, guitar-smashing rock stars in all of us. Be the first to know the technological future with G4's coverage of CES 09 Live.
We're covering this year's most innovative gadgets, gear, and gizmos live from the motherboard of all tech shows. Only G4 brings you TV's most extensive live coverage from the moment the doors open.
CES 09 Live, January 8th and 9th, presented by Acura Advance, only on G4. Check out g4tv.com/CES for updates.
All right, now stay with us. Our top 3 stories of the year are on the way.
And considering that there's still some time left in 08, we're actually going to be really upset if Nintendo decides to invade a country or something.
Yeah, well, find out what actually did rock our worlds right after this. Welcome back to X-Play's look at the top 10 stories this year.
2008 was a magical year when they took the console Flame Wars to new heights, all thanks to a special announcement at E3. The Microsoft press conference, you could hear an audible gasp as the first frames of Final Fantasy XIII were revealed.
Microsoft had just taken one of the biggest exclusives ever and de-exclusivized it.
Is that a word? And it's our number 3.
At this year's Microsoft E3 press conference, Bill Gates and friends had a big surprise. Final Fantasy XIII, which was expected to be a PlayStation 3 exclusive, is heading to the Xbox 360. This was quite the coup for Microsoft. Since Final Fantasy VII was released over 10 years ago, Sony has had a tight grip on the franchise. With the exception of various PC ports and Nintendo spin-offs like Crystal Chronicles, the series has largely appeared on PlayStations, PS2s, and PSPs. Yes, Final Fantasy XI did hit the 360, but by that point, the massively multiplayer game was already long past its prime. What's more, Part 13 will hit store shelves on the very same day as the PS3 version, at least in America. Since the 360 isn't a huge seller in Japan, it's unlikely they will release an Xbox version over there. Fans online were ecstatic when they heard the news, and the momentum of the announcement led many to declare Microsoft the winner of this year's E3. Unfortunately, those fans still have a while to wait. Currently, Square Enix will only say that the game is expected sometime next year in Japan. The North American release could potentially be as late as 2010. That's a long time to wait to get your Chocobo fix.
The old E3s were like the Wild West. They were mostly these lawless places. You could get anything for a price. Then the ESA brought in their own fun sheriff. They locked it down, effectively sucking all the life out of this once colorful celebration. Then, in October, a ray of light broke through the gray clouds of despair. The old E3 was back in town and looking to settle a score. One of the biggest gaming headlines of 2008 didn't actually involve a specific video game. In October, the Entertainment Software Association announced that 2009's E3 Expo would be a return to the show's former glory days. For the past 2 years, E3 has been a shrunken-down, invite-only affair. This was due to certain exhibitors balking at the spiraling costs of mounting extravagant booths. They also questioned the logic in trying to score media attention at such a crowded event. It didn't help that the deafening music of the show floor and garish booth babes distracted from the games themselves. Many publishers reportedly threatened to walk unless changes were made. For those reasons, E3 Expo 2007 and 2008 were very low-key. And even though some people liked the less crowded atmosphere, most bloggers agreed they missed the good old days. This past October, those people got just what they wanted. The ESA formally announced that E309 will be back to its larger format. They also revealed that it will return to its early June slot, the 2nd through the 4th at the Los Angeles Convention Center. The show is contracted to be there through at least 2011. The early June date will give publishers the time they need to equally distribute their breaking news between E3 and other big international gaming conventions, as well as give developers more time to get their games perfected and demo ready. It's hoped that the bigger crowds will return, although after the past 2 years, attendance is not expected to be anywhere near the record 60,000 of 2006. The really good news is that the exclusive invite-only rule will not be applied next year. This should allow media and websites with the proper credentials to gain entrance. So bring it on. New games, fans galore, and major announcements. We're ready for E3 to kick some ass again.
Stay with us. Our #1 story of the year is just after the break.
Here's a hint. Hookers!
Well, I'm interested.
I know. We'll be right back. Welcome back to X-Play XL. Today we are counting down the top 10 stories of 2008.
And the #1 story of the year is, drumroll please, Fable 2.
Wrong show.
Oh,
acclaimed film director Darren Aronofsky called the release of Grand Theft Auto 4 his entertainment moment that mattered for 2008.
And we tend to agree with him, even if the fountain was a bunch of nonsense.
GTA 4 crushed sales records and did the impossible. It forced PS3 and Xbox fanboys to get along as they stood in line to purchase their copy together.
The launch was like a Christmas miracle in April, and that's our #1 gaming story of 2008. The biggest news story of 2008 wasn't about alien sex scenes or hostile takeovers or epic lawsuits. No, the most significant single story was actually a happy, upbeat event. The unprecedented success of Grand Theft Auto 4's launch. We all knew that the game would be big. We simply didn't know how big. Due to pent-up demand, stores held heavily attended midnight launches. In the first 24 hours on store shelves, the game racked up an astonishing 3.6 million sales. And in its first 2 weeks, GTA 4 moved 6 million units, which led to more than $500 million in revenue. Those sort of numbers crush any other 2008 sales launch in any entertainment medium. Leading up to the game's release, skeptics were debating whether the series was still a potential juggernaut. Some people argued that big-budget, large-scale adventures like GTA were slowly disappearing, supplanted by casual games like Wii Sports. At the same time, Take-Two, the corporate parent of Rockstar, was besieged by a hostile takeover bid from EA. So the company was understandably very happy with the results of the game's launch. What's more, GTA 4 was a critical hit. X-Play gave it a 5 out of 5, and most reviewers considered it an excellent entry in the series.
I killed people, smuggled people, sold people.
Many cited the intelligent adult script as a key reason for its success. Others simply enjoyed seeing Liberty City with true next-generation visuals. But whatever the reason, people snapped up the game like hotcakes. And for its record-breaking numbers, the launch of GTA 4 deserves its place as the biggest gaming news story of 2008.
The insanity and backlash that followed the release of Grand Theft Auto 4 wasn't necessarily unexpected, but it was mostly inaccurate. To get the hard facts, we called up an expert, one that actually did some research before weighing in.
While 2008 might have finally brought us Grand Theft Auto 4, it also reignited the battle over video game violence. Do games like GTA affect a child's psyche? And are new laws targeting retailers who sell M-rated games justified? Today we tackle the controversial subject with the author of Grand Theft Childhood, Dr. Sheryl Olsen.
Joining us today, co-director for the Center of Mental Health and Media at the Massachusetts General Hospital's Department of Psychiatry and co-author of the book Grand Theft Childhood, Dr. Sheryl Olsen. Welcome back to our show.
Great to be here.
So, for those out there that may not have seen our previous interviews or read the book, can you summarize your study?
That's a tall order. What we set out to do was to look at what's normal for middle school age kids today in terms of playing video games. We saw a lot of studies about college students having experimental things for 15 minutes and so on, and no one seemed to know what are kids today doing, with whom, why, how much, what's normal, because if you don't know what's normal, you don't know what to worry about. And given that youth crime has been going down in recent years as video game play has gone way up, you figure if it affected a lot of kids in a bad way, we would see something.
Now, did you find that there was a correlation or something between young children playing violent games and violent behavior?
Correlation is an interesting word. We did find a statistical relationship between 13 to 15-year-old kids playing mature-rated games and things like bullying other people and getting into physical fights. Correlation is not the same as A caused B. There's a lot of other factors that could go into that. We did recently try to control statistically for some of these other kinds of factors like aggressive personality, and we did still see a little bit of an effect of M-rated games specifically on increased bullying and fighting. But remember, those behaviors are pretty normal for middle school kids. So we're not talking about assault here, and we're talking about kids who are in public school, so kids who are otherwise healthy.
Obviously, this was the year where Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, and that always tends to be something of a touchstone for anxieties about what violent video games might be doing to kids. Is there any cause for concern if there's a parent out there that believes their child is or had been playing Grand Theft Auto 4?
I think there's cause for concern if your child is playing any video game, whether it's GTA 4 or something else, to the point that they're isolating, their grades are dropping, and they're not getting out and seeing friends, doing other activities. Because that could be a sign of other problems. Maybe the child is using the game to basically self-medicate for depression or anxiety.
State Senator for California, Leland Yee, is once again trying to put a measure out there that would give criminal penalties to game stores that sell M-rated games to minors. Is there any benefit from trying to have this legislation to actually offset, the potential dangers of a minor playing a violent video game?
Well, actually, if you look at the law, which I guess was doing again this morning, it's not about M-rated games. It's about games that have particularly heinous and depraved depictions of, awful intentional violence against a substantially human-like character. It's a really tricky thing. One of the difficulties, I think, with the laws proposed is you'd have to have a whole new group of people, I don't know who that would be, looking at games and saying, well, is this character substantially human, this head crab or this big daddy or whatever, and is this heinous torture or not? You could have some very comical conversations, I think, behind the scenes about whether a game met those criteria.
Now, it really does sound a little bit like Leland Yee and some of these parents out there just don't seem to understand games, and that's where the anxiety seems to be stemming from, not so much what's actually material to one particular game.
I think so. When you think about it, if you're a politician or a parent and all you've really seen of video games are these awful clips of the worst possible thing on the evening news, someone using, a wounded enemy as a shield and full of bullets and then breaking their neck or something awful like that, which you can see in some games, of course they're going to think, oh my God, this is terrible. This can't be good for our kids. And if they haven't had the time to sit down and watch how kids play and what they do, it's really understandable that they're concerned.
My final question, obviously there are many studies that deal with this, sense of correlation between violent games and violent behavior. Some of them do try to make a case that there really is a direct correlation. How do you account for all these various studies that seem to have an equally diverse conclusion?
What you really have to do is take a close look at the methods that they use. And it's hard to do when you're not an academic type to look at these articles and figure out, well, who did they study? What did they measure? How did they define, exposure to violent games? How did they define a violent game? And then what kinds of outcomes were they looking at? There was a recent study that was labeled as a longitudinal, over time type study, and they looked at kids for 3 to 6 months, and you could have a seasonal difference in whether kids can go outside and play or not.
Dr. Olsen, thanks again for coming on the show. You're always welcome here because you're a pleasurable tonic to what can be an overheated and ill-informed media debate.
My pleasure.
We'd like to give a special thanks to all of our guests for joining us today. Now, we should talk about, what games you're looking forward to next year.
I don't think we have a good sense of all the games that are coming out next year, but I'm excited for Mad World, though I wouldn't... Diablo 3, if that puppy really does drop next year, that's where I see a lot of my time getting wasted forever.
And Blizzard does an excellent job of their games. They don't release them until they're ready. So
no, they don't.
No, they don't. Which there definitely is a lot of waiting. But there's also that assurance that the experience that you're going to get is probably going to be a satisfying experience of the quality that you're looking for.
And also, really, they're masters of replayability. Even Diablo, which is the most narrative of all of their games, there's a lot of life in playing it with other people online.
I'm definitely excited to see more and learn more about Infamous.
Yes, which we will be doing in a couple of days.
I'm very excited to check that out, actually. So let's talk about disappointments from the past.
Well, I think the one that's probably the most major for us would have been The Force Unleashed. And I think disappointment is really the word. I'm not going to go, poo all over this game all over again. We really had high hopes for this game, and it just did not seem to match. Despite the glitches, the gameplay never really met with what you felt the game was supposed to be delivering.
Right. Do you think they knew?
They may have. We do know that there were some troubles over at LucasArts.
Right.
Obviously, some people lost their jobs.
All right. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time.
Hi, 2009.